Good evening. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us today. Tell us your name and tell us about your project.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Albert Michelson, and the experiment we conducted was set up to find the difference in the speed of light traveling in different directions. We set up a light source and mirrors to make light travel parallel and perpendicular to the luminiferous ether that we believe existed at this time. Luminiferous ether is the medium which light waves would travel through.
Interesting. So, what were you guys trying to find or do?
Well, we were trying to understand some of the properties of the theoretical luminiferous ether.
Okay, well, where did the project or experiment occur?
Well, at first, I conducted the experiment in the United States Naval Academy. That's in Annapolis, Maryland. But some of the problems we had was it wasn't quite accurate enough to be useful. Afterwards, the second experiment was conducted in the basement of a heavy stone dormitory. It was actually Albert Dormitory in Western Reserve University.
Okay, so what other significant events were happening around the world at this time?
Well, in the U.S. anyway, the Industrial Revolution had been going on for several years. Also, the first automobiles were starting to come about, and there was a growing prevalence of electricity in homes in the U.S.
Okay, well, who else was involved in this project with you?
Okay, so I had help from my colleague Albert Morley. He was a professor at Western Reserve University, which is where the second experiment took place.
Okay, so what was your role in the project?
Well, I started the initial experiment at the Naval Academy, like I said, but the contraption I built to do that experiment, it really wasn't accurate enough. So me and Morley got together and we built upon my old experiment to create a more accurate one.
Okay, well, what impact did your project have on the physics community?
Well, our results, they weren't exactly what we were looking for. They weren't exactly what we thought would happen. So technically it was a failed experiment, but this failed experiment was a major stepping stone in discovering special relativity, which Einstein would do a few years later. And it also took a step towards disproving the existence of a stationary ether.
Okay, so how did you improve the accuracy from your first experiment to your second one?
First was the location. As I said before, we did the second experiment in the basement of a heavy stone dormitory. This was to get rid of any outside forces that could cause vibrations or anything like that. We wanted to dampen them, so if anyone rode by on a horse or if there was any kind of movement, it wouldn't throw off our results. Also, in my first experiment, the light wasn't traveling that far. So in the second one, we got the light's path up to about 11 meters, and at that distance, we should be able to see the fringes much more easily and notice these differences.
Okay, well, that all sounds very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Michelson, for speaking with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.